Okay, everybody. For those of you who are members of my Facebook page, my name is Greg Schwem. Thank you for joining me today. What is a very special and very serious interview. Those of you who do know me, you know what I do. I am a corporate stand-up comedian, and occasionally I do live streams and interviews with guests that I find interesting, either from my corporate comedy shows or my television show, A Comedian Crashes Your Pad. And those of you who've seen these live interviews, you know that they are always funny. This one is not. I am joined today, and this is something we set up on the fly. I'm joined today by David Freeman, who is an old friend of mine. We will get into that shortly as to how we know each other. David is a teacher at the Pechersk School in Kyiv, Ukraine. That is where he is right now. I've been following his Facebook feed, and obviously, like so many people, am very concerned about his well-being. So, David, first of all, thanks for joining us. And before we get into our relationship and what's going on over there, I guess my first question is, where are you and how safe do you feel there?
Well, actually, I'm right outside the cafeteria at school.
Okay,
you're at I feel quite safe. We're not outside the city limits, but we are a significant distance from downtown. So in the sense that we are going to be a target, no, we will not. But that doesn't mean that something errant couldn't go awry and there could be a danger. But right now, I don't fear for my physical well-being.
Okay. And now tell me a little bit about the Pechersk School and your role, your position in it.
I'm primarily an English teacher, and I'm also the diploma program coordinator. It's part of the International Baccalaureate program. I'm responsible for shepherding what in the U.S. you would call your juniors and seniors through a 2-year program to finish up and earn this rather prestigious degree and get on to university. So that's kind of my job, is to help these kids cross the finish line.
Mm-hmm. And these kids are from all over the world, are they not?
Yeah, we have a big chunk of students who are from Ukraine. Many of them have 2 passports, but we have a lot of international students. We have a lot of Americans. We have a lot of kids from other embassies and NGOs.
Mm-hmm. Now, you mentioned you're at the school. You are seeking refuge in this school, right? This is your place of shelter. And I know that even as we tried to coordinate this interview this morning, you sent me messages that said the sirens were going off. I have to go into the basement. Are you in the basement now?
No, as I said, I'm outside the cafeteria. And as I mentioned to you before we started, that, if you're going to have to shelter somewhere, a school is a pretty good place because it is set up for children. And so you have a lot of things in place that make life fairly livable. We have a swimming pool. I was in the pool earlier today. And then also, we have a gymnasium, and the kids were in there playing ping pong. And we have access to the cafeteria. So, it is fairly livable in that sense. So there are a lot of worse places to be sheltering. So this isn't bad.
And the kids are there too. The kids and other faculty members are there as well?
There's only a couple of students because they are the children of staff members. We haven't been actually having students on campus now, I think, for 2 weeks. We went all online as this situation deteriorated. Then we've had a week of vacation, and it's during this week of vacation when the war actually started. So we actually have no students attending class on campus. Now, we actually will resume instruction on Monday, but that will be, again, virtual, all remote.
Right. Okay. All right. And how long do you think you mentioned that you have a lot of supplies and so forth. We talked about that a little bit before we got on the air here. How long can you subsist in the school, supply-wise?
Supply-wise, the only thing that we will eventually run short of will be food. We have plenty of water. There are big water bottles on all the floors that we can easily access. Food will be the issue eventually, but right now we seem to be pretty well equipped with that. In fact, we have access to the caterer's refrigerator here on campus, so we know that there's food in there. And one of our teachers who's here, her husband is a professional chef. So, we are going to enjoy some of that food.
Okay. And are all the students there, or did they have the option of sheltering at the school versus at their homes or elsewhere?
There's the only, like I said, there's maybe a half a dozen kids here. Only a couple of them are students. Other kids who are here on campus are the children of some of our staff members. So the director of the school and the board of governors very generously said this will be a shelter for those people who have no place else to go. So there's about 25 or 30 of us who are here right now, spread out through this one wing of the campus, and everybody has a place to go downstairs to, and when the sirens do go off, and they will go off.
Mm-hmm. Okay. By the way, I'm not sure I'm connecting to you via StreamYard, as I mentioned. I believe people who are watching can ask questions. I am not 100% sure of that, but if you, David has asked if he said he's agreed to answer some questions if anybody has one. And if you have one, you should be able to type it in and it should show up on the screen, and we'll try to get to some of those. But I have plenty of questions. I probably should mention how you and I met. We go way back. Prior to me being a comedian, I was a television reporter at WPTV in West Palm Beach, Florida. David was also a TV reporter. That is how we met. And then, obviously we both chose different career paths. And you actually, once you started teaching at Pechersk School, you contacted me because you did a unit on stand-up comedy with your class, correct? And you asked me to talk a little bit, to come via Zoom and talk a little bit about what it was like to be a comedian. And I got to say, we've done it 2 years in a row. And I so look forward the second time, because the first time I realized how smart these kids are and how the intelligent questions they asked, and also what big fans they were of stand-up comedy, American stand-up comedy. And it was a great discussion. And then also I met the faculty members of school, because I did, again, the power of Zoom. I actually performed at a virtual Christmas party, not this past year, but the year before. So I feel like I know an awful lot of the students and the faculty members there. So, that's why I reached out to you and so forth. So let's talk a little bit though about the situation. First of all, you said that you shut down about 2 weeks ago as things intensified, right? That's when you shut down the school or in-class learning, right?
Right. When it became evident that the embassies were advising their residents, their citizens to depart, our school honored those advices, from those embassies. So many of our teachers took that opportunity and did leave. We have them scattered around the world. Quite a few of them are just across the border into Turkey. A number of them are in Europe, but a few have gone back to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of our classes have been delivered online. But we're experienced at online teaching, because the COVID has provided us that experience over the last 2 years. So for us to go remote learning is like, we know how to do that.
Right. As long and the fact that you still have internet there, I think is it says something too. As long as, again, let's keep our fingers crossed. But the Wi-Fi, you said, even works in the basement from the school, and you and I are talking like it's nothing. And I should probably mention the irony here of where you are versus where I am. I am conducting this interview. I am on a cruise ship right now, a Princess Cruise Line cruise ship, doing stand-up comedy for a bunch of people who are on vacation and having the time of their lives. And I find it, I feel incredibly full of guilt what I'm doing and what is surrounding me versus what you're going through. But we also talked offline that there's an awful lot of employees who work on cruise lines, particularly, and even on this ship, who I've met, who are Russian or are Ukrainian and so forth. I've talked to some of them. The ship's photographer on this particular ship is from Ukraine. And I last spoke to him about, I think, a day before the actual invasion began. And I have not seen him since. And I would love to, I'm sure he's still on the ship, because it's not real easy to get off of a cruise ship. And I would like to know what he's up to. But first of many, did you really think this was going to happen? And when did you think this was going to happen?
The build up through this in December and early January, no. But when the U.S. was saying, we have intelligence, this is going to happen, he can pull the trigger within a couple of days, then at that point, yeah, I knew this was real and it was going to happen. And the idea of a false flag operation is classic Russian behavior in a military situation. Just ask the Finns. So this is the kind of a thing that, once the U.S. government said this is going to happen, and when Biden said this was going to happen, then I pretty much decided, yeah, it is. The problem is, and I am married into a Ukrainian culture, and my wife and her family was saying, no, we've been through this before. This is not going to happen. It's just Western paranoia. No, I think the U.S. government was spot on.
Okay, interesting. So how does one prepare then? Once you realized it was going to happen, over here, we can't even imagine something like that. Maybe we need to start imagining it, but how does one prepare for an invasion of where you call home?
Well, even though she would kind of roll her eyes at me, I insisted that when we went shopping, we would buy extra stuff over the last, I would say 3 weeks. We started to stock up more and more stuff, a lot of canned foods, a lot of those kinds of things that we know that if we didn't use it, and that was my line to her was, honey, if we don't use it in an emergency situation, it's not going to go bad. It can just sit on the cupboard and we can use it. And then, I think it was last weekend, I said, we're going to make a major shopping trip, and we're going to also stock the apartment where your son lives. And so we did that. So we bought a lot of stuff last weekend when it was beginning to get really evident that this was going to happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You said, I'm going to quote, as I said, I've been monitoring your Facebook page and so forth, and I want to just quote something.
You're stalking me, Greg?
What's that? Yes, I am stalking. That's right. Isn't that what people do on social media? This is from your Facebook post from about, I'd say, 5 days ago. I think the fight for Kyiv will be over in a week at most. We will see what the occupation forces have in store for us. You still believe that?
Well, the Russians have an overwhelming advantage in materials, but I think what we're seeing as the battle is unfolding is the Ukrainians have an overwhelming advantage when it comes to the will to fight. We're seeing reports of Russians just of giving up and abandoning their units because they don't want to kill Ukrainians, and that's the problem here for the Russians is they view Ukrainians as family, as many of the people here have family on both sides of this border. As I think I explained to you, my wife was a daughter of the Soviet Union, born in Kazakhstan, then Uzbekistan, and came to Ukraine because her parents were engineers and they lived at Chernobyl. So, as being part of the Soviet Union, there's a lot of mix here. But I mean, the mixing goes back even further than that. It goes back to Russian Empire days. And so that's what I talk about. The fact is, this is a lot of confused people now, and you're seeing it happening in Russia. There's a lot of protests because they don't want to kill Ukrainians. The average Russian does not hate the average Ukrainian.
Right. And yet you also said, when we talked earlier, I mentioned the ship's photographer to you, and you asked how old he was. And I said, I thought I'd put his age at about the late 30s. And tell me what you said. If he was to return, if he was to get off this ship right now and return to Ukraine, what would happen?
Well, I'm not speaking as a government official, so I don't know for absolute. But what I'm hearing is that all men of fighting age are being conscripted. They're showing up at places, and they're being essentially immediately inducted. But again, this is not something I've heard officially. This is what I'm hearing word of mouth. So, you got to take that with a grain of salt. I am not an official speaking in any kind of capacity, but I don't know if anybody can even get back here. The airspace over Ukraine has been closed, so there's no flights. All the borders, everybody's going the opposite direction, going out of Ukraine across the land crossing. So, I don't know if somebody could get back.
Mm-hmm. Now that brings also, you talked about what you've been hearing. And for most of the world, obviously, we're all getting our reports via news agencies and so forth. Where are you getting your news from?
There are two international services that I really trust. One is Al Jazeera, and the other one is BBC.
Okay.
Anybody else, I don't have a great deal of faith in. Okay. Another one of my coworkers who hadn't been here for a couple of nights has just shown up. So.
Okay. Anybody's welcome to join, by the way, if everybody's bored
Yeah,
there.
listen, they're trickling in. We've had a couple of families who've been here for a while, and then made contact with family and have gone out to the village. Because Ukrainians it's a very agricultural society, so everybody has either a relative or a place of their own in the country. It's very common.
How safe is it to travel outside? How safe is it to walk outside? And have you been outside?
Yeah, my wife and I did a walk around our compound today, and it was a little bit sunny. So I don't fear for my well-being. I can look out if I go up a couple stories. I can look out and see people walking around, but not very many, not like you would normally see. So yeah, people are staying inside, but the city has really emptied out, and I think the aggressors here are trying not to kill civilians, but they are, and the civilian deaths are rising. But they want to claim that they are liberators, because they've always claimed that the government in Kyiv was a Western puppet that is only serving the interests of the United States, and that's what Putin has been selling for quite some time, for years, for 10 years. And that's how he sold it to the Russian people, that it's time to take matters into our own hands and go for what you would describe in Western terms as a regime change. So, what we're watching here is regime change being done by the Russian Federation.
Okay, so liberators, not conquerors, is what Putin is trying to sell to the country, right?
Absolutely. But, people here don't buy it because they don't see themselves as being in need of liberation. They're a vibrant, functioning democracy. And they don't see that the fact is they need to cling to the tit of Mother Russia. Sorry.
Right. No, that's fine. No, there's no mute button. There's no 7-second delay here. That's no problem. Let's get back to a little bit about the coverage then. So you get your news, you said, from BBC and Al Jazeera. What is being cautioned here a lot is, and I'm reading Twitter and so forth. And I said, I read an interesting tweet this morning, just about 30 minutes ago, from somebody, and it was just a random person. It wasn't somebody involved in the news and so forth. That, they said, of all the people, for everybody who wants to say, what would have happened if someone else was president in this country, or what if this, this happened, or as I said, we're very into assigning blame in this country about pretty much everything. But what they said is, stop it. Stop saying what would have happened if, what should have somebody have known, because there are, as you said, innocent people dying right now in your country, and that's what we should be focusing on. So my question to you is, do you ever look at American, even though you've told us what you subscribe to as far as, and who you trust, have you peeked at any American news? Have you peeked at CNN or Fox or anything like that? And if you have, what's your take on the way it is being covered over here?
Well, from hearing from people who are actually consuming that news, they paint a much more horrific picture than what I'm experiencing. Okay, there certainly are some intense battle scenes, but that isn't everywhere all the time. But that, having your experience in the news business, is
if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah.
Right.
So, they're always going to find the most gruesome video, the most anguish victim that they possibly can. And I don't mean to downplay the suffering that is going on here, but, be realistic. Is the media is a business and they have a product to sell. But I've seen a little bit of CNN, and it's okay. It kind of jives with my experience, what I'm seeing here. But we're following closely what is being broadcast in Ukrainian to Ukrainian audiences, and it's a good 3-4 hours ahead of what you see in U.S. media. I haven't watched Fox a whole lot since the war actually started. I watched a little of the buildup, but I always find Fox just as predictable as CNN, and so therefore I don't really find either one of them particularly valuable.
Okay. Where do you think this is going to? How do you see this ending, or do you? I mean, do you see yourself? Do you see Ukraine eventually being under the control of Russia? And how do you feel? Have you thought about that? Have you discussed it with your wife? And what does the future hold if that happens?
Well, if it's really hard to predict. Like I think I said, the Russians have overwhelming military superiority, but they don't have the will to fight as much as the Ukrainians do.
Mhm.
Nevertheless,
Does that surprise you? I mean, does that surprise you that there has been such a passionate, maybe uprising is too strong of a word, but just the willingness to defend what you believe is yours?
doesn't surprise me at all from the Ukrainians that I've gotten to know over the 8 years that I've lived here. Not at all. No, I
Okay.
mean, they're passionate about their Ukrainian culture. They're passionate about their independence. They're passionate about democracy. And it's developing here. It's not perfect, but it's moving forward. But what I kind of see happening is what a lot of people have kind of predicted, and that is that Russia will win the battle but lose the war.
Okay. Right. And as far as lose the war, elaborate on that if you could. When you say lose the war, what do you mean by that?
Well, their goal is to bring Ukraine to its knees and back into the post-Soviet empire. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And Ukrainians won't do that. And I think what you'll see is the installation of a puppet government, and then the Russians will have to stay here for a very long time because there will be a significant resistance movement that the West has already said they will fund. So
Mm-hmm.
and so there will be an ongoing struggle, and I think it'll be an Afghanistan played out all over again with the Russians declaring victory and going home.
Mm-hmm. How do you feel How do you feel about the United States' response to all this? You mentioned earlier in the interview you thought the United States was spot on in its intelligence, which is why you made the preparations that you did. Besides the intelligence, how do you feel our government is reacting to this? Are we too passive? Are we making are we overblowing things at this point? What are we doing? And maybe what should we be doing?
Well, that's a really hard question. I don't want to see World War III.
Nobody ever said that to me when I was at Channel 5. Nobody ever said that's a really hard question. Maybe once. But okay, go ahead.
Well, I don't want World War III, and as soon as you have Americans shooting at Russians, you have World War III,
Yes.
and nobody wants that. So, but I'm not sure sanctions are enough at this point, or they should be just 100% isolation, meaning you don't let Aeroflot go anywhere on the planet. You shut down all of their banking. You take SWIFT and you smack them across the face with it several times, and you seize all of Putin's assets anywhere on the planet, and you just make life miserable for that leadership, and that leadership, of course, then will turn around and make it miserable for their populace. And maybe in the long run, this leads to his downfall. He is one of those people where he needs to go.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me where else you've lived other than South Florida, which is the only place that I know that you've lived, and Kyiv, because that's where we met. But where else have you lived, and how did you end up over in Kyiv, and why?
Well, it feeds back to another Russian-inspired political crisis. I was working in Pakistan and decided had had enough of that, and was returning home to the States when there was the revolution of 2014 called the Maidan Revolution. And at that point, the school had lost some English teachers because people didn't want to stay, or they didn't want to come because they'd signed a contract, didn't want to. So there were some English openings, and I knew the principal at the time, and I wrote her and said, "Hey, you looking for an English teacher? I'm happy to go back into the classroom after having been a principal for 5 years." So I took that step, came here, fell in love with it, love Ukrainian culture, married to a Ukrainian. So, I like my life here. So, but Prior to Pakistan, it was China. And prior to China, it was Kenya. And then prior to Kenya, it was Ecuador, and then South Florida before that.
Wow. I was bragging to everybody that I was in St. Thomas yesterday. That kind of pales in comparison to your resume. Do you plan to stay? And are people that you know, are they planning to stay?
I think so. This is a very difficult time. There is no doubt about it. But I honestly think our school's going to survive. We may be a little smaller. There may be fewer students for a while. But, it's a resilient organization that has made contingency plans to continue the business operations. We can do online teaching for a while because we have an established record of doing that. So if an international school is going to survive in Kyiv, it's going to be us. And, we're going to be here. I believe we're going to be here. And so I'm going to be here.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right. I said I would probably try and limit this to 30 minutes, and we're coming up on 30 minutes here. So, what's that?
I said, I don't care. We can talk.
That's right. I mean, I literally could talk to you all day long about this, but as I said, I don't know how political I want to get, because I think it's almost too early to be doing that. I mean, and sometimes it's just bad when there's so much misinformation going on in this country as far as what's going on, and like you said, the images that are coming in that maybe don't tell the whole story because they want the graphic and the violence and so forth. And yes, we've seen the families being pulled apart. We've seen the bombs and so forth. Here's another thing that you posted on Facebook, and I wanted to ask you about. You put up a picture of something called the Friendship Arch. Again, not having ever been to Kyiv and not knowing what I would even see. Talk a little bit about the Friendship Arch, what it meant, and I assure you will probably be talking about the irony of it at some point.
Kyiv sits on the Dnieper River, and there's kind of a bluff that overlooks the river, and the top of one portion of that bluff is this really large arch. And it's a friendship arch that was constructed during Soviet times that has a bunch of statues of people depicting who look like Russians and people who look like Ukrainians, and they're all getting along and shaking hands and celebrating their brotherhood. So, the idea that now the Russians have unleashed this massive attack on Ukraine, you're right. There's a certain amount of situational irony on how this turned out.
And you also mentioned about not to get too personal, but have you had any heated disagreements with your wife because of where you said she is from Russia? I mean, obviously we talk about politics over here all the time versus different sides and what we feel. And, marriages have gotten out of hand and so forth because of our politics and so forth. How has it been in the Freeman household?
There's no, I mean, she sees this place as her home. She sees the Russian Federation as the aggressors, so, she's a Russian speaker, but she's not a Russian nationalist. And I think everybody needs to understand that clearly. There are many, many Ukrainians whose first language is Russian, but they are very loyal Ukrainians. So it would be a mistake to say, oh, well, you speak Russian, you're in Ukraine, you're siding with the Russian Federation. Absolutely not. I mean, some of the most militant Ukrainian nationalists I have met are native speakers of Russian. So that divide is not an accurate division. Now, does she have some family members who are Russian nationalists? Yeah, but certainly not my wife, no.
I see. Okay. One more question. Biggest misconception that you think that you've either heard about what is going on over there from either a personal, a political, a professional standpoint. What would you say is probably the biggest misconception? What would you just tell people and say, don't believe this, or be careful before you believe this?
Well, I don't think that anybody in this audience is naive enough to believe the propaganda that the Russian Federation is trying to put out, that somehow this was the result of action by Ukraine, or that the Ukrainians have instigated this. So I don't really think that that's a misconception. I think most people in the West have understood that. Now, there's a few people who are in countries that are sympathetic to the Russian Federation, and they might buy into it. But I think pretty much everybody can see through that. So there isn't, that is not a prevalent thought here, that somehow it was Ukraine's fault. I guess the misconception might be that this was going to be a cakewalk for the Russian military forces. They're finding this much more difficult than they anticipated. They're suffering much more significant losses than I think went into their calculations. But what just came out today, that Putin is willing to talk, and he would welcome a delegation to meet in Belarus, and that he's willing to talk. To me, I would say that's a load of crap. He's not interested in talking. He proved he wasn't interested in talking leading up to this situation. To him, it's another way to manipulate what's going on in order to give false hope and then hit him with another hammer. So I would say don't have any hope in the idea that there might be a peaceful resolution to this that the Russian Federation will agree to. There is no chance for any kind of ceasefire or peace at this point until there is a victory one way or the other.
And you're the president of Ukraine. How do people feel about the job he's doing? Again, this was somebody, for those who don't know, this was a man who went from being an actor, a comedian, right, to having the top position in Ukraine. And how do people feel about the job he's doing right now?
Well, being the outsider in politics is nothing new. We've seen that in the States.
I was going to say we have.
I think he has proven himself to have a certain mettle to him. He is on TV every hour on the hour, giving updates, reassuring people. So he has been certainly, being the face of Ukraine during this crisis. He has vowed not to leave. I wouldn't be surprised if they relocate the government to someplace like Lviv, further west, a little more secure location. But at this point, I think people have believed him and stand by him. Okay, Greg, there's a siren going on. I'm going to have to cut this off.
I understand. Okay, very good. I figured that might happen. I really appreciate the time you spent with us, and I will repost this on my page. David, thank you very much. All right.
Yeah, I got to go.
All right. Be safe. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
And that's it. So we thought that might actually happen. I'm grateful to David and everybody at the Pechersk School that allowed this to happen. Thank you to StreamYard for making this so easy. I have been using them off and on, and they are probably one of the easiest and the most user-friendly means of doing live streaming. So I will repost this on not only my Facebook page, which some of you are watching on now, but also my YouTube channel at youtube.com/Greg Schwem, and also on my LinkedIn channel, my LinkedIn page. Please subscribe to both of those, and you can see this interview in its entirety. So I hope everybody learned something about what is going on halfway around the world. I hope that that you maybe have a new thought process for what is going on, and that you don't believe everything that you read and hear in the Western media. So everybody have a good day. Please pray for the citizens of Ukraine. And this is Greg Schwem. See you later.